Now that we're working on a much more fantasy and fantastical environments, there's a huge amount of freedom for us now. First of all, you're not tied to something that everybody's aware of. Like, you know, if you're going to make a laundromat, there's certain criteria you have to stick to. Like, you would expect your laundromat to have washing machines and dryers and etc. Where if we're going to be making like a crazy demonic altar for, you know, raising the dead, we can pretty much go in a whole bunch of directions. Some of the dungeons and the puzzles and the things we want to do also allow us to create way more off-the-wall ideas. You know, if you wanted to do like a pendulum or something, you had a puzzle that you had to jump across and then kind of like, you know, ghost hook to another area. We're thinking, okay, what's that going to be? Is that a broken bridge? You know, we're trying to tie it into the real world. Does it kind of make sense? You know, and then you're trying to put some logic to it. In some ways, we can kind of throw logic out the window a little bit and just ask ourselves, is it going to be cool? An overall mandate for like the style of Darksiders 2, I had a chat with Joe about it once, and you know, I said, in a nutshell, in a word or a sentence, you know, where are we going with Darksiders 2? So he says, we just want to make it strong. So nothing wispy and, you know, whimsical. Dave added to that, and he actually had a pretty good one statement thing, is nothing in Darksiders should look goofy. Those are kind of like, if you want to, something we're always kind of thinking about in the back of our minds and distilling into everything we do. So we look back and he goes, that looks weird. Yeah, I don't think that's Darksiders. So we're all kind of getting a sense, and hopefully, from my sensibility, from having worked on Darksiders 1s and being pretty familiar with Joe's style, teaching the other guys as well also about what makes something Darksiders. I've done a couple of paint overs and drawings and, you know, illustrations to try and explain what's a good way to go with Darksiders and what's not a good way to go with Darksiders. You can have elegant curves and things like that. You know, for some games that works. For us, everything's got to be edgy. It's going to be faceted. It's got to have a surface treatment that looks like it's kind of like, you know, pretty rough to the touch. So we would never really have all these smooth, rounded surfaces and things like that. Everything kind of usually ends up in a sharp edge or cut off or something like that, which is indicative of Joe's style. So these are simple concepts that we can actually apply to almost everything in the game. Whether that's a tree, a rock, you know, a dungeon, an entire door, or, you know, a switching puzzle. Sometimes it's very hard for an artist to try and break that style down. They may take this and interpret it into their style, but they may not be realizing that they're doing it. So like, you think Death, okay, well, you know, well, I guess he's bony, right? Like, look, he looks bony to me down there, and he'll do this kind of like rib cage stuff. He goes, no, this integrity of this rib cage structure is very important. Like his fingers, you may think, oh, he's a bony guy, his fingers are thin and spindly. No. Because it's Joe's style, his actual thumbs and knuckles are actually very thick and chunky, because that's the Darksiders style. Joe's artwork also, again, is very vibrant. It's always kind of like a very strong in color. So that's something we're kind of pushing a lot, especially as we theme the dungeons. We're going to make sure you have a very different experience depending on the mood of the dungeon and where you're at. The Dead Plains is an area that's in just continual decay. So we wanted to show that off. We wanted to show buildings that were, you know, partly crumbling. Through VFX, we're probably going to start doing effects that basically, you know, emit off the buildings, and there's like a whole bunch of streams of like, you know, dust and debris constantly falling. It's kind of like it's eternally decaying but never completely falling apart. There's a quiet desolation in this area. We went very kind of like purple and blues and stuff like that. To us, kind of, it was very like a Death color. But then it was also very, very close to Death himself. So it's almost like, well, this isn't kind of like his home. We don't want it to feel like, oh, I've come home. You know, I love it in this place. Our lighting artists, we played around with the color lookup table, which is kind of like a screen effect that we have, and play with a couple of ideas of toning it more down to desaturation and actually playing with some like more muted green colors. And that definitely took us a lot more of a towards a somber tone, and a lot more of a kind of like closer to like the Death we were looking for, really, kind of like the dead areas that we're looking for. There are times we may get a high-level mandate from Joe, like when we're looking at an area, for example, the Dead Plains. We'll say, well, okay, what's the motivation here? What are we looking at? What do we want to do here?
Yeah, Han Randawa, this guy is awesome. I remember I was at an E3 and I saw this like Wolverine game, and I thought like wow, like that art style it kind of looks like how I draw Wolverine, but I was like, like I'm just full of myself. That's like a total coincidence, but it struck me as being really cool looking. And then years later, you know, we hired this guy Han as our art director. And he's like, yeah, you know, I've always loved your stuff. I worked on this Wolverine game, and we like used your style as like the template for how Wolverine would look. And I'm like, oh my God.
Joe's a very light-hearted guy. Like You would have expected someone with a lot of ego, considering his status in comic book, but amazingly easy to work with, extremely creative. He'll definitely, even if you think you've got a cool idea, he'll definitely distill it down to something else and take it to another level.
We have a lot of really talented artists, and they all bring their own unique spin to it. Like, 'cause I feel like I get tired of my own stuff after a while. Like I kind of know I have like a bag of tricks that I like a certain thing a certain way, and just seeing another artist's take on it is like, whoa, that's cool. I would not have done that. I love it. And so, it really benefits us having the team like doing a lot of this stuff now.
We do start traditionally with design, driving it from the script, like here's the quest, this is the motivation of the level. We will play through the level. It'll sit there, we call it gestation for a while, so basically it'll get played through for a couple of weeks or whatever, and so we won't really lock it until, because you see something every day, you can come back to it in a week's time and it goes, I totally have a better idea of how we can do this. In that time, certain puzzles and things, we will take screenshots of the environment and we'll paint over them, and we'll start painting over what the artistic style of that might look like, or certain puzzle elements, what they might look like. We all have a very good idea of when something's not right, and it's like, not feeling it, dude. I don't know what it is, I'm just not feeling this. We'll go back to the drawing board, literally.
We constantly play the game, and stuff that doesn't work needs to get revamped. And you'll always hear the artist say like, hey, I did it like how it was in the concept, but the concept is just, it's a starting point, but nothing ever goes in the game the way it was in the concept, like ever.
When we do the leads meeting, we look at the art, everybody's like in the art, oh, what about this? Oh, that's rubbish, why are we gonna do this? It's like everybody has a very strong feeling about everything. Everybody has a strong feeling about design, everybody has a strong feeling about every aspect of the game, to be honest. So it's not like, hey, don't be commenting on my art, that's for me to comment on. It's like, no, nothing's anybody's individually, because we're making this game as a team.